The next topic is testing Spring applications. I can do unit testing without Spring and integration testing with Spring. Um, if you look at like how many of you doing a test-driven development? How many of you are doing writing a test case while doing a development?
I do, Manjunath.
Good. I think most of the time, if you go and ask what is the test-driven development, can I write this test case later, or is it something test-driven development is writing a test case before even writing the code, or can I write the test cases after being in the production or customer? Okay, there are two extremes. Okay, we don't need to really go for the other two extremes. As long as our code is being well tested, actually functionally tested, major functionality tests has been done. Part of your development, that is what it is actually taking care of test-driven development. Okay, doesn't matter whether you write the test case first and then start writing the code, or after testing you write a test case to do it. It really doesn't matter. So it's a two different extremes. But important thing is write an automation test case to verify that code works in most of the cases. Okay, so driving this in the development, it'll be a good way of doing it. Not should not be a downstream activity. And most of the time, if you ask this question to yourself, have you written the test cases or have you done the test-driven development? Most of the time, you have an answer saying that I don't have a time to write a functional code itself. On top of that, you are asking to write a test case. Okay, so that's the kind of answer you get. But it's important to write a test cases while you are doing a development. Okay, so it will save a lot of time, and actually if you invest the time, it will actually saves a lot of time after your developments. It will become faster in the development cycle overall. The team which follows this test driven development very religiously seems to have a lot of time to do testing and doing other things. Okay, so one thing is, like, if you look at this, all the agile process which is happening nowadays. Okay, let's say, like, you are the PLM who gives a requirement for you to go and design, and he'll comes up with some requirement and ask you to implement. And if you ask questions, what do you do with? We'll talk about that later when we do a demo. Okay, because that is how we need the agile process is working. They themselves will not be very clear about what the requirements are, how we are going to do. And you take some one iteration or two iteration to get designed, and you have done very good design using a Spring and all the design principle you applied, and later you come back and show the demo, and he says, like, all this is fine, and now I have a different requirement. Can you take care of this? So the new requirements which you are going to implement in the project, which takes to redesign your existing design. So several times you need to go and refactor your existing code to accommodate the new design. So moment you do a refactoring, again all the functional test you need to do manually if you are not having a test cases. Okay, so if you are not having a test case, you will have end up with a lot of time in doing a testing. Moment you have this test cases, okay, and when you do a refactor, you can quickly go and say that yes, all my code works fine. I have tested the unit test cases. That becomes very easy, and very you can confidently go and say a refactoring of my code works. And the same thing applies for bigger projects where you wanted to migrate or upgrade a lower version of the libraries to latest version. So in those cases also, you may have to go and do a refactory. And let's say, like, when you wanted to do this kind of activity where you wanted to upgrade to latest versions of let's say Spring framework itself, and some of the features, if you need to accommodate, you need to go and do some refactoring. And what you do is, let's say you don't have a test case to validate every cases, and you have done the refactoring and you have migrated to or upgraded to the latest version. and you have done some functional test, looks like it is fine, and you have given that load to QA to test it. And QA comes up with like tons of bugs during their testing. And if you find the root cause, what was causing all those things, you have done some refactoring to accommodate the new changes which is there in the latest library. So in that case, you cannot really know what you cannot really go and confidently say that I have done my testing and which is going to have a quality of this percentage. That becomes a problem. And in those kind of team where you do the refactor and cause this so many issues, the moment you go back again next time I want to do refactoring, then the refactoring word itself banned in that team. You cannot go and use it. The manager will not let you go and do a refactoring because it's going to hit the quality issues because we don't have a test case to validate it. So in any case, either in the smaller projects or bigger projects, if you have the test case to do validation, it will save us a lot of time, and also you can do a lot of new enhancements, new functionality testers in a much better way. It also gives you the confidence on the quality so that I can take care of it, especially in the agile process. Okay, testing makes to think about your design. Moment any functionality function is getting into untestable, where you have a lot of code, it's there. Like if you go and look at some functions has like uh, 200 lines, 300 lines of code, where you cannot go and write a test case to test it. So that itself will actually trigger for you to go and redesign that module or method. Okay, there is no hard and deadline rules that you need to take care of it. You need to moment you are getting into a stage where you cannot test the method, then that's a good part for you to go and reconsider the redesigning. Okay, and it is to make sure that your code is maintainable always. Okay, many cases you go and modify the code, and test case will fail, and instead of going and redesigning the module or method, we will just go and comment the test case because test case anyway low priority. Then as long as my functionality works, there is no problem. So some of the test case which is failing or having no issues, we will just go and comment it. That's not a good practice. You need to go and do a reworking that method to make a new test case or go and update the test cases. Okay. The focus is always to test to make what the critical code is works in all the scenarios. Okay, we don't need to go and write a test case just for increasing the number of test cases. Test with a setter method, getter method works or fine. That's not the focus. It should help you to not write the code that you don't need. Okay, and also it is a find the problems in the early stage. Okay, and most of us have studied this graph. People who are coming from the computer science background, which is there in the software engineering. And that time we may not have invested to understand this, but now being on the grounds where we support, and when we are in the supporting the customer, fixing one problem, okay, is having a huge cost. It has to go through a lot of iterations. And if you find if we could have find those problems in the early stage, the cost of fixing problem will be very less. Okay, so always like we need to focus on finding a problems in the early stage rather than finding it later stage. Okay, if we have unit test cases, the most of the problem, some of the problem actually been found by customer, which we could have actually figured out during our unit testing itself. Okay, so those are the things we should actually caught in the much early stage. Always like in the olden days, like when I joined an industry, we used to follow the waterfall method. Waterfall method is like first we'll have first couple of months is for requirement analysis, and then doing the future implementation, then coding and unit testing, finally functionality testing. Finally it will come as a integration testing. So by the time we hit the integration testing, our project status is 80% of the project is completed. What is left over is a integration test. So integration testing, when you start integration testing is work with the different modules and see how things works. So when you are doing integration testing, you will find a lot of problems, and we say like you're supposed to send this and you're supposed to throw this exception, but you're returning null. So all those conversations will start. Finally, when according to the agreement, you are supposed to throw an exception, but you are returning null. then that guy will raise a bug. In order to do that, some of the redesign, you will have to go and change the code to redesign the entire thing. That takes a lot of time. And if we do this integration in the early phase, then we could have caught this problem early and fix the problem. Sometimes some of the issues you may not be able to fix it because it costs us a lot. And again, when you go and fix this, it is going to slip our time frame. So all those issues go to crop up there. So always focus on doing a early and continuous integration to make sure reducing the bugs towards the end of the cycle. That's the focus. So how are you going to write the unit test cases? So there are two things. One is like unit testing, another one is integration testing. Okay. Unit testing is going to test your unit of functionality and keeps minimal dependencies and isolate it from the environment. So you don't need to go and deploy to do a unit testing. So it's completely isolation manner. Whereas an integration testing is to interact with the multiple units working together from top to bottom. It also integrates with an infrastructure. Like if you wanted to talk to DB or if you wanted to send a JMS messages or kind of things, like it will have to integrate with an external factors. So that's about an integration testing, and unit testing is just to testing independently without isolating from the environment. So now how I can go and write a unit test cases. So the two approaches. Um, Basically, like if you look at the unit testing, removes the links to the dependencies. Like test should not fail because of the external dependencies. That means you assume that external dependencies are injected properly. Considering there is no bug in the external dependencies, you should take care of the way you are writing as a unit testing. It works in that. Considering the dependencies all are fine. Hmm? You can write the unit testing in two different ways. One is using a stubs and another one is using mock. Okay. We have already seen the way the stub works. Okay. Stubs can be implemented using an interface which is already there in the system. Okay. The way it works is unit testing. So let's say I have a business class which is like authenticator implementation. Okay, which has a dependency on the JPA account repository, which will be talking to the production DB through Spring configuration and all the JPA configuration. So this is my production mode, and when I wanted to test in the unit testing, I have this business class which is authenticator implementation, and this actually implements this JPA account repository as implementation of one of the interface, which is account repository. So what I do is I take that and implement this account repository stub class, and inside that I'll do some fake objects gets created. Whenever you ask some data, I will return that object. Okay, that will be done by using your test cases. Okay, and the test case I'll be writing using a JUnit framework, and I don't have any database to work with it, and it is completely independent of it. Okay, let's take how this authenticator implementation class looks like. Okay, so let's say this is my business class, which is an implementation of authenticator, and I have a account repository as an interface object where I'll be injecting through a constructor. Okay, so this gets injected through constructor, and now I have a business method, business class, business logic to verify. There's a method called authenticate where it takes a username and password. So given this username and password, first I need to go and query using a username, get the account object. From the account object, go and match the password. This is the business logic to be validated. And this has a two case because this is returning the boolean. When in case two cases, one is success case, another one is failure case. Okay. Now I need to go and write a two test cases to validate this business logic works in all the cases. These two cases will ensure this. At any given case, these two cases should be passed. Okay. Now the way I go and do is I need to go and do a dependency injection externally for this account repository. So what I do is I'll go and write this stub account repository, which is an implementation of account repository. And I'll implement this method get account given user. I want to return one of the object. Let's say I'm passing Lisa as a username. Okay, if it is matches this username and my hard-coded one, then I go and create an account object with Lisa and secret as a password. Very simple thing. I'm going to test with only one user in my system. I'm going to pass the user as a Lisa, and in my hard-coded this sub account repository, I check whether Lisa has the account name, whether what you passed is going to match. If it is matches, I'm going to return this object. That's all. otherwise null. Okay, this is my stub. Okay, now I'm going to inject this stub to my authenticator implementation class. So the way I do is I'll go and write the test class. Inside this I have authenticator implementer, and I'm going to create this authenticator implementation using a constructor. I do a stub account repository dependency injection, and there is nothing Spring here. It is completely JUnit test case and your independent Pojo class. That's all. There is no Spring involved here. There is no dependency injection. Okay, and I have a two test case methods. One is a success authentication, another is invalid password, which is going to throw false, and I need to check that. So what I'm doing is authenticate that authenticate method. I'm going to call the Lisa and secret as a password with the right information. This guy will go and call this authenticator method. Inside the authenticator method, I have injected this stub account repository object. In the stub account repository object, which is having this Lisa is equal to Lisa, yes, then it's going to create an account with a Lisa and secret password. Then what it does is, and here it comes and it says like object, account object, and say account.get password, and what I have passed was password, it is going to compare. Yes, now both the password is same because I have passed the password as a secret and also account object as a secret. So this is going to be success. Okay, so that's the success case. And in the failure case, what it does is you pass the Lisa and pass the invalid password, and since the password doesn't match, okay, so this guy is going to throw a false. Okay, when it throws false, I will go and assert I'm expecting false because I passed the wrong information. So the test case is going to pass. So assert true, I'm expecting true from this method, and I'm expecting the false principal. That is where I can do an asserts. So all these other assert methods which are coming from the JUnit. That means when you do assert, it is going to throw exception and stop. So that test case will be failed. Okay. So one important thing, any test case without having an assert, it is as good as not writing a test case, because this is actually validating actual outcome. If you are not validating at the lower level details, then it is as good as not writing a test case. Don't assert with saying that null check. Assert with not null or null. Okay, that one of the things you need to check it, but don't make that as a test case. Okay, invoke this object and see whether it is written to null or not. That should not be the test case. Go and say if it is not null, what is the next step to check it functionality wise. Okay, so those are the things. What are the advantages with the stubs? Stubs is like easy to implement and understand and reusable. Okay, and disadvantage with the stubs are like when the interfaces goes through some changes, or interfaces methods are non-trivial. When I say non-trivial, if it is like interface methods, like few methods are there in the interface, it is good to go ahead with the stubs. If I have like 30-40 methods in the interface, and I need to go and stub has to go and implement all the methods. Okay, and also that is one case. Another case is if you go and refactor code, some of the test case is going to fail or break because this test case stubs will not be part of the refactor, so it is going to cause the problems. So these are a few disadvantage. Okay, how do you overcome? I can overcome using a mocks if required to be implemented. So mock is one kind of another kind of framework or libraries which are available with the different vendors. Whole conceptually it is same with all the framework. Okay. The basically mocking is you go and create an object with an interface with mocking object, and you go and set some expectations. Okay. When I ask for it, what you should return. Okay. So like what method you will be calling and what you are going value you are going to return out of it. So you go and record that. Okay, and once you record it, you go and exercise. That means you go and consume. Once you consume, you verify everything is fine or not. Once the verification is done, you go and check whether whatever you have set an expectation have been consumed or not, have you met or not. Okay, so this is a kind of steps what you use in the mock frameworks. Okay, so the way mock framework was, like, there are several mock frameworks are available in the market, so you can pick up any one thing. There is a Spring is uses this heavily. This is like easy mock. There's a easy mock, power mock, J mock, things like that. Framework. Conceptually, all framework does the same thing, but implementation could be a little different. So here is an example with the easy mock. Okay. So easy mock, I'm just importing. This is a static import. All the methods in this class is the static methods. I can directly go and consume it. So like the create mock is coming from the easy mock class, from the easy mock framework. What I do is this account repository is a interface class. I'll go and give this interface class to create a mock object. So now this guy will get created the mock object. Now the object is there, but it doesn't have any method. Okay, if you directly start consuming this method like account repository dot get account, then it will throw an exception because I have not recorded anything yet. Okay, just it is a kind of an object. It's like a kind of another version of the proxy object, let's say. Okay, but methods are not implemented, so we need to go and record those methods now. So now what I do is a reference of this object. Okay, mock object, I'll get injected to the authenticator implementation. I'll just go inject it using a constructor. I'll create this object. So now what I do is I'll go and now do a recording. What I record is whenever I call this account repository dot get account with a Lisa, what you should return me is account object with Lisa and secret as a password. I'm expecting this and you should return this. So this is how I go and record it. Okay, this will happen in the recording phase. You set an expectation, you set a behavior, what you are expecting. Okay, once you put all the required expectation for different methods, what you are going to consume in this test case, put that and then stop recording it and put it into a playback mode. So the way I can do is using this replay will actually stop recording and I will start ready to consume this. So once I've done this, I'll go and start consuming it. Now I say authenticator.authenticate with a Lisa and secret password. Once it is like inside, it will go and call this method will go and call account repository.get account with a Lisa as a username, and you get this object. Okay, then take that object and authenticator method will compare the password with this and this and matches and returns the true, and assert this true, and you're done with the test case. Same thing if you want to do a testing for the not okay case, you can go and set an expectations and say set the different password here to check the not okay case. So finally, once everything is done, you go and verify it. Whatever you have set an expectations, a list of expectations, and what is been consumed by this your business method has been matched or not. If it is not matched and you set up more than what is expected, then it will verify, will throw an exception. If this is an optional thing, which if you want to do it, verify, you can do it. It is just to make sure that what you have set an expectation, have you been consumed or not, all of them. If all of them are consumed, then it will be fine. Otherwise, it will throw an exception. And again, this is an optional. If you want, you can use it. Otherwise, you can ignore this part. Okay? This is a way you can go and write the mock objects, mocking using a mocking framework. As I said that there are several mocking libraries are available, like there's a mock8, JMock, EasyMock, and PowerMock. Spring uses this EasyMock heavily, and I've just had an example of it. But conceptually, all are same. Only the implementation difference will be different for each different frameworks. Okay. Advantage with the mocks are you don't need to go and write an additional class to maintain it, like in a stub class. Okay. You don't need to go and write because I'm creating a mock object inside my test itself. Okay, and you only need to set up the methods what you are going to consume in your test case. If I have like 30 interface method, if I'm consuming one or two, I can just go and mock it for only those objects. I don't need to go and put a behavior for all of the methods. And you will be testing the behavior of the state as your code. So mock test cases is actually mirrors what it is there in your actual code. Okay, so all mock. So one disadvantage with the mock is like when you start using, if you are not using, when you see this kind of code, it is a little bit harder to understand at the first in the beginning. Otherwise, once you start using it, it should be pretty easy to do. Okay. So now I have two options of doing a unit test case, one with the stubs and mocks. Okay, which one to use? Okay, you can actually do a mix and match, whether like probably you'll use a both. In the case of like very non-trivial interfaces, you go and use the stubs. If it is trivial, you will go and use the stubs, and non-trivial cases you go and use the mocks. Okay, and both are different. Mocks are different and stubs are different. And whenever people started misusing these names, like mocks are same as stubs. Okay, um, the guy called like Martin Fleur. So this all this word mocks, stubs, dependency injection, inversion of control, all this word has been created by the guy called Martin Fleur. And if people were posting in a different way, or if it doesn't make sense, if you use that mocks or stubs, okay, this guy will get angry and he'll start go and write an article about it, why mocks are not same as stubs. Okay, so for similarly like dependency injection and IOC IOC, people are start using like IOC is same as a dependency injection. No, it is it's a different. Okay, then he goes and writes an article and explains why marks are not subs. Okay, and similarly, what is the difference between dependency injection and IOC control? So if you have time, go and look at this site. There are a bunch of article. It's nicely explained with a lot of examples and all this stuff. Okay. Again, emphasis is like based on your situation, you consider based on your interface things. It's up to you what you want to do. But it's all critical that you need to go and choose one of the method to go and write your unit test case. Yes, that's about unit test case. Coming to integration testing with Spring, the
Oh,
test. Yeah.
one question. I mean, for writing unit test case for DAO classes, which is the best option, mock or stub?
See, are you asking about testing the DAO itself or injecting a part of the DAO?
No, testing DAO.
That means you want to test the business logic of the DAO methods.
I mean, DAO is doing some insert, update, select. So
Huh.
I write test cases for them. So most time I use stub actually.
Hmm.
So because the slide say that mock is a preferred option. So I'm a bit confused about
No, no. See,
which way is best because
most of the
mock
time,
or
these
stub.
stubs and mocks will be fit at the service level. If you look at, if you want to test your business logic.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I understand mock is good at service level, but testing DAO, I think stub is a better option.
Yeah, you can choose based on your situation. You are considering how many interface, what you need to talk to below in things. You can choose. There's no hard and dead rule. You should use this or use that. You can choose appropriately.
Okay. Okay.
So integration testing with the Spring. So we are going to focus on different components and things like that to work with and top to bottom checking. Okay, so in this case, like I wanted to consider all the dependency things, see whether my data source and see whether I have all other external servers or dependencies are running, infrastructure things I need to check and other things on it. Because I'm going to send a request from the web layer and it has to go through service layer and interact with the DAO and not talk to DB and come back. Okay, and I want to test like state of the objects, things like that. If you have certain cases, you need to test it, and you need that. Okay, so normally like integration testing will happen on the deployment. Let's say without even deploying, I want to do an integration test. Okay, so in that case, like Spring provides some of the scaled down version of the infrastructures. Like for example, like data source. Okay, I don't really want to go and run my database server. What I want to do is I want to go and write this like in-memory database to go and check whether things are fine or not. Okay, so in that case, like Spring provides this embedded data source where if you provide a schema and a test DB, you will be able to go and test it without even having the actual database server. Okay, that's one option. Otherwise, you can go ahead and use the connection pool where you can connect with the actual server if it is up and running. That's another option. Okay, so the same way, like the way the integration test works in the production, you have a UI or somebody is calling the caller, the authentication implementation is service class, and JPA account repository dog class, which is going to talk to DB. It's a production DB, and in the integration testing, you have a test DB. And still, I'm going to use a JPA account repository. I'm not going to inject the stub here. Yeah, my integration test will start from the top to bottom. Okay, you like I can even write the test case at the web layer also. The web layer to check like URL, and I can test the web controller layer also. And so I'm going to test this by calling this method, and internally it calls the JP account repository to talk to test DB. The test DB is what I can use it as a data embedded data source, or I can connect to something else. Okay, so since integration runs with an Spring environment, okay, and I wanted to load the application context for all the beans which is wanted to create by the container itself. So the service class and all repository beans, I wanted to create part of my Spring itself. So I want to create this first and get injected here, and I want to create this and start looking up and using this object inside my test class. So I want to do it in the container. So what I want to do is I want to go and create an application context to test this. Okay. Now remember we have created the application context part of the setup method. Right? We saw that test method, and we have that setup method where I have annotated with the before. So that setup method where I have annotated the before will be called every time the test is going to begin. Okay. So if I wanted to create an application, so now with having this, putting this application context in the setup method is going to cause a problem for me, because that method will get called for each and every test, because it is annotated with the before. It's not once, it is like if I have a 10 test case to be executed, each before executing the test case, the setup method will be called. That's a behavior. If I go and create an application context in the setup method, which is having a before annotation, my application context will get created 10 times in that case, which I don't want to do. Okay, so what Spring has done is, like, to take care of certain things like this, Spring has actually taken this JUnit framework and altered some behavior to add it, and it is given a new constructs to take care of it. I don't want to go and create an application context for each and every test method. I will go and create once and share it with all the test cases. Is everybody able to hear me? Hello? Hello?
Yeah, Manju, we can hear you.
Okay, great.
I can hear you.
Okay, got it. Some message came across, somebody is not able to hear me. All right. So what Spring has done is Spring has created Spring JUnit for a class runner, which is a new construct. So using this configuration, it creates an application context once and share it across a mini test method. So such kind of things has been provided by all those new constructs and new additions been part of Spring test jar. While doing an integration testing, you use this module to do it. Okay. So how do I configure? Now I will take away this before method, before annotation. What I do is I will add this new annotation, which is a run with Spring JUnit for class runner. And I'll provide a Java configuration class to create an application at the class level. So this annotation, context configuration, will take all the annotation, all the Java configuration classes, create an application context, and share it with all the test method. Okay, and now in whatever the beans which are there in the test system test configuration, and those beans I can directly go and do auto wire to use it. I don't need to deal with an application context anymore to do a lookup. I say like transfer service, do auto wire. This transfer service is already part of bean creation, will be done part of the system test configuration, and since it is there, I'll just go and do auto wire. And class is also becomes a part of the container. So now I can do an auto wire of the any bean which is created by this container. Okay, so I don't need to go and write a context creation part of the before the setup method. Okay, start using it and run the test. It becomes very simple. Okay, point to the system test configuration file and inject the into the test. Okay, and at the context configuration, when you use, like, you can give a multiple Java configurations with the Flower basis. So all these classes will get loaded and create a context, and you can do auto wire for any kind of things. And if in case you don't have application context class, and you can create an inner class, inner configuration class. So this will get loaded by the class itself, create a context and start creating a application context and start using it. Okay, and the way you can supply the XML files for the application context using this like class path, you can provide an XML configuration file to load and create an application context. So you can also give a multiple configuration file. Let's say like if you just use the application context configuration without even providing anything, in that case, there's a default behavior. It is expected like if you look at the class name, the transfer service test. Okay, with this class name and dash -.xml file. So you need to have this application context created in the same package where this test service transfer service test method class is available. In that case, if you don't specify anything, this will default to this XML file to load and create an application context. So this will be done by automatically. Like you need to create this, like transfer service test dash context.xml file. You need to create and put all the bean definition, and automatically by default, if you don't provide anything, it will pick up that to do it. If not, it will throw an exception because you don't have a configuration file to load. Okay, so and as I said that the Spring JUnit for class runner will create a context once and share it with the multiple test classes. Okay, so it will be taken care by this implementation. And most of the time, like nobody will go and disturb the existing bean. And in the test case environment, if you want, if you have made some of the bean like alter or anything, and if you change some of the beans or change the object, in that case, if you want to go and recreate for those kind of modified objects, so it will go and if you add this annotation, which is dirty context, then it will go and force to recreate those objects. Automatically it will be done. So you don't need to do this, but in case if you have to go and recreate, it will be done. Okay, so that's about the way you can create an integration test. And I think we discussed about this environment abstraction and profile. Okay, let's see how we can actually use in a test environment. Okay, so we discussed about the environmental variable where you load the profiles, things like that. And also activate the profiles to use one of the profile. Okay, in the test environment, let's say I have defined already multiple profiles, one for dev, one for QA, and one for production. And in the test environment, I can go and say active profiles, which is annotation, which you can use it only in the test environment. And this guy will actually go and activate these two profiles, okay, while running. The JDBC and dev profiles will get activated, or when all the beans which are defined in this profile will get created and be part of a context. Okay, that's one thing. Let's say like this is a test class and you have a dev class. If this JDBC, all the list of beans which is there in the dev configuration gets created in this. So you go and use this in the Java configuration, and the same thing can be used in the annotations also. In either case, whether it's annotation or Java configuration or XML, the way you define, in the test environment, you can go and use this activate profile for that one. Doesn't matter whether it is a Java configuration, annotation, or XML. Okay, same thing can be used. So this is in the annotation, same activate. And in case of XML, you go and define this bean profile with this name and the other name, and still I'll use this active profile to activate one of the profile. So in all three different approach, in the test environment, I can still go ahead and use an active profiles to activate one of the profiles. Okay. So let's say I think we discussed this one more part in property sources. If you look at here, I have a property placeholder which is loading a config props. So config props is a reference to a property. So where is this defined? Well, this need to be get injected. So now this config props is being defined here. There are two beans, and each one of there are there in the different profiles. So what is this profile? Say profile equal to dev and profile equal to production. So based on what you activate, that config props will get created one of the bean, and that will get referred by the property placeholder. Okay. So now which one will be loaded based on the dev or production? So now based on the dev or production, I'm also going to import the specific configuration file, specific application configuration. So where it is getting loaded is, I have this environment variable which is like a current environment, which is there in the this dev and production are coming from this two property files. Like this is for the development and this is for the production. So when this property file gets loaded, okay, and you will see this whether the current environment is there or not. Okay, so now based on this current environment, it is going to pick up an application context to import in this class. Okay, so one of the things I want to go and activate, whether it's a dev or production, which I'm activating from the test or standalone or web application. So the correspondingly this is going to get created after loading this dev properties or production properties. It is going to look for this current env, and based on this, like there is a prod config or dev config.xml file will get imported to this. Okay, so together profiles and properties, you can have like a dynamic way of choosing an imports and load those appropriately in your configuration. So that can be achieved using this profiles and properties in the next slide. Okay. So benefits of testing with Spring. So no need to deploy with an external container to test your an application functionality. You can quickly run inside your IDE because all this will be created in the container. Even you have the scaled down versions of data source, all the stuff. So allows to reuse of your configuration between test and production based on just you swap out or enable the different profiles to use appropriate data source and JMS queues, things like that. Okay, so that's about it. So we discussed like testing is essential part of the development. So don't do testing, writing a test class just because like, organization has put the quality goals. Like you need to cover the code coverage, or you must need to have an around 80% of the test case need to be covered. So don't do just because of that. Even if you are writing a 20% of that test cases to cover the maximum critical part to test your business logic, that is still enough. You can take a still deviation, but just don't satisfy the process needs. It has to be really inappropriate. And writing a test case without having an asserts, it's as good as not writing a test case. So take a note of these kind of things and make the test case writing part of your development activity. Should not be a downstream activity. And I have seen some cases, I will write a test case later, and some organization, they will hire the new hires or interns to do writing a test case, and they are not empowered to go and modify any code. And it should never be a downstream activity, so to write the test cases across. Okay, so you need test case to test in an isolation manner. Integration test case is to test with the multiple units working together. That's all. Any other questions?